Well, hello again, and welcome to another episode of Wrestling Beyond the Pulpit with the Good News Gang. Once again, I am joined by my tag team partners, Pastor Jackie Ranieri from Clare UMC, Pastor Curtis Clark from Marysville UMC, and Pastor Kim Metzer from Hope and Welcome Corners UMC in Hastings. And I am your host, Pastor Matt West from Marble Memorial UMC in Milan. And we are so glad that you've joined us once again as we continue to wrestle with these topics that are on our hearts and minds. And so we're going to jump right into things today. This week, on Monday, was Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And so a lot of our discussion will focus around him as well as a couple other things. But it's the question I have to start with today says that Martin Luther King Jr. was an avid pool player or billiards, depending on which part of the country you're from or the world. But if you were given a choice of only one, would you prefer to play pool, table tennis, darts, or foosball? Quite a list to choose from there, but which one would you choose?
Now, is table tennis like ping pong?
Yes.
Thank you. I would do ping pong. Table tennis. That would be me.
Forrest Gump played ping pong.
I know.
Yes, he did.
I was so happy to see that.
I would say, what's that?
No, go ahead.
Darts or foosball?
I'd take darts myself.
Yeah.
Being able to throw sharp things at a board is fun. I was never in. I never got into ping pong.
Oh,
Too quick.
We used to play it in the youth room when I was a youth.
My college years, we played a variation of ping pong, but
Oh.
Yep.
I don't mind pool. But yeah, I'd probably have to agree with Curtis and go with the darts. Of course, some people may be asking when we say foosball, are we talking about actual foosball or football, depending on which part, or if you're a Waterboy fan, foosball's for the devil.
Devil, Bobby. The devil.
Well, all right. Well, hey, good news is I'm sure we could probably go to a local watering hole and find any of those games, or at least, a couple of them, and maybe work off some energy playing one of those. And
We've got two of them at the church. Actually, we've got three of them at the church.
usually ping pong's a church thing, so
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't see it at a
lot of
watering
youth
hole
group
too
rooms
much.
with a ping pong table.
And we've got
That's
darts
foosball.
here at home. So I've got them all covered. Party at our place.
Just hide
There
the
you
red
go.
Solo cups. So.
Yeah.
Well, in his autobiography, Martin Luther King wrote, "At the age of 13, I was shocked my Sunday school class by denying the bodily resurrection of Jesus. Doubts began to spring forth unrelentingly. Yet he would go on to become a minister and get a doctorate in theology. Discuss the role of doubt in your own spiritual journey."
Ooh, that's a tough
Went
one.
from fluff to the
Yeah.
deep end.
Yep. Fastball right down the pipe. No meatball here.
Oh my.
So, yeah, I mean, that's interesting because I did not know that. But of course, some would take into consideration his age. I mean, he was 13 when he,
Right.
denied the
Year-olds
resurrection
doubt
of
everything.
Jesus. I mean, not something that I would say is all that uncommon. But yeah, I mean, does doubt play a part in any of your spiritual journeys?
I think so. I think for me, doubt is there in areas that then encourages me and pushes me to seek more knowledge and more understanding. I don't think doubt is meant to just lay there. I think it's meant to challenge us. I've got a couple groups of church that are finishing a study of the book of the Gospel of John, and we've just came through the passages of post-resurrection when Jesus visits the disciples in the upper room, and Thomas, who has this moniker, this label of doubting Thomas. And if you actually look at the translation, it's not doubting, it's unbelieving.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that opens up the door then to have belief, for doubt to be changed. I don't know if Dr. King went through the rest of his life as pastor and advocate and everything he did, still believing or still doubting in the bodily resurrection. He just may have been challenged by the idea when he was 13, which I don't have an issue with, you know.
I think one of the concerns is, doubt can be good as long as it doesn't turn into worry.
Mm-hmm.
When you allow that much, I guess, that much doubt per se to seep in, and then it becomes more of a worry than a doubt, that's where it could be troublesome. But I agree with Curtis in the fact that I think doubt can be challenging and certainly, could be a test that's put before us.
I agree with Curtis. It's not meant to just lay there. It encourages us to think, to go deeper. I mean, if you stop and think about it, all of our beliefs are just incredulous. And you have to suspend some of your disbelief in order to go there. And it's easy to doubt that God says that God is who God is. But I like that. I like having some unknown, because if we know it all, then what? I don't want someone who's I want something bigger than myself. If I can understand it all, then what is there to believe in? Really,
I think you hit it on the head in the fact that it's like, without doubt, then that must mean that we're always right. And I mean, if we're never challenged, they'll, it's kind of like eating vanilla ice cream all the time. Boring.
A couple weeks ago, I got a call from a parent, and she had a kindergarten son, and he got in the car that day and came home, and who knows what happened in the playground and that, but he announced that God was not real. There is no such thing as God. And she was upset by that. Oh my gosh, I can't have him going around being a, heathen and not believing in God. And it's like, okay, let's step back. And, so I started, giving her some hints, start talking about the heart and, start talking about the body, like God, he got these fingers because of God and that, but his whole thing is, but I don't see God. How can I believe? And it's like, this is a 5-year-old talking. And it's like, but how many of us, God, I don't see you in my life. I don't see you working. I've got the struggle right now, and you are just letting me sit in the pit for a while. And doubt does happen. And, and I know in my own personal life, but I think you said it before, and I know you were saying it jokingly, Kim, like, fluff to real stuff. But I think as faith, we learn it as fluff. It is fluff to us. Yep. We believe it. Yeah, we're on fire. But man, sometimes it's like, woo, you want me to do what? I have to believe what? I think it's hard for people. I think that's where sometimes doubt does come in. And, are they trying to sell me, what are they trying to sell me here? A set of encyclopedias or what? But I can see how people have doubt. It's just, but it doesn't mean that they don't believe in God. It's just, they're doubting some of the things, like Thomas, I want proof, like this little kindergartner. I don't see God. How can I know God's there until I showed him, I talked to him on the phone, and I have to share real quick. I said, do you have fingers and toes? I said, do you have 5 fingers and 5 toes? And all of a sudden there was no sound. And the mom yells, he's counting. He'll get back with you in just a moment. So out of the mouths of babes, he was like, I do. I goes, I got 4 long ones and one stubby thing. And I said, well, that's called your big toe, and that's called your thumb, so it was just kind of funny. I'm like, well, God created it. So it was cute in that. So when he got done and I saw him at church that following Sunday, and he was like, I do believe in God. It was like, so it was maybe fluff to him right now, but who's to know where his beliefs will be after that. So
maybe he will get a doctorate in theology, and he'll be quoted later to say, when I was 5, I said there was no God.
Right. Absolutely.
Right. And I think if we look at quite a few of the Psalms, David is struggling with his faith.
Yep.
He cries out, God, where are you?
Yep.
Where are you? How could you leave me? But then the progression then is, he comes back to a sense of believing. And so I think there were times when David had doubt. There's a section in scripture in Mark 9 where Jesus basically, says all things are possible for those who believe. And this man responds, Lord, help me in my unbelief. And so I think there's examples in scripture where we have people who have doubt,
Mhm.
and it doesn't mean that we're unfaithful. It doesn't mean that we're heathens. It just means that
I'm a heathen.
we're working through our salvation, and that's the process that we're all in. You know, there's a big movement, or a movement within some areas of church, of deconstructing faith. And I follow some pages on Facebook and some pages on TikTok of people who are working through that. And that's the process. And I think, you know, to an extent, seminary and our education in theology is like that. We've talked about on this platform before of, you know, how we go into those formal settings, and we have some of those long held beliefs broken down so that they can be built back up in a new way.
Yep.
And I think that's a healthy part of our faith journey as well.
My wife and I, we've recently been watching Young Sheldon. If you haven't seen it, recommend it. It's a lot funnier than I anticipated it being. But we just watched an episode the other day where Sheldon takes a philosophy class. So he started going to college, and so one of his classes is philosophy. Well, of course, in Sheldon's eyes, his professor's like this hippy dippy chick that's, you know, kind of off her rocker, but somebody who believes in scientific fact, in that, you know, there are these things that determine, you know, what we are and how things work, was now, you know, essentially what we've been talking about, you know, because of the philosophy class, doubt was put in his mind. And so then he began to question, like, whether what he believed was actually real, or like if anything was real, of course, because of this philosophy teacher, you know, like, well, how do I know time is real? How do I know I'm real? You know, so it was just interesting, you know. And of course, at the end, and as we all know, Sheldon, you know, goes on to a life in science. But for a moment there, it was this question of, you know, doubt was brought into his world, and what is he supposed to do with it? Because he wasn't sure now that the thing he had believed all 11 years that he's been alive was now being put in question. So I certainly think doubt can be challenging and a good thing for most. So moving along here, Dr. King was also quoted as saying, the Western arrogance of feeling that it has everything to teach others and nothing to learn from them is not just. Discuss this attitude and where you have experienced it the most.
Ooh, mission trips.
Ooh,
Mission trips.
yeah.
Hey, we're going to come down here and fix you and feel all good about ourselves, and then go back to our lives, and you will be better. Yeah, it's a lot of arrogance.
I think too, even going to camp, you know, think of your youth camp and going there, and, you know, you're going to come out a believer whether you like it or not, you know. And it's just that, and it's, you know, kids are frowned upon if they are doubting. Kids are frowned upon if, you know, they act out in a way and not understanding why they're acting out, but maybe they're acting out because they're confused and what is it I'm learning, and they're kind of frightened maybe to understand what's going on. But then you have on the other spectrum kids that just say, I'm a believer, and then they want to get baptized at camp, and then they come home and never change their lifestyle. So I mean, there's different, there's other areas in our life.
Yeah. And I think there's, you know, when we talk about mission and engaging, especially in overseas mission, having done some work in our conference with the Liberian team, that we struggled with this idea that, you know, we have all of the resources, that we have all of the blessings to give them, when in retrospect, there's a lot they can teach us. There's a lot they can bless us with, to the point where, you know, they should be sending missionaries over here to tell us and to show us what worship looks like, you know, what authentic, real worship looks like. Because, you know, once you experience it in that culture, it's, you know, from what I've understood, it's very different than our 1 hour, you know, Jesus in a box worship, as opposed to 2-3 hours of drum rhythms and those kind of things. I think there is this perception that because we're the mighty USA, that we have all the answers, we have all all the resources to just impact everybody's life in a positive way. And
Well, two thoughts off of what Curtis said. The one was related to the fact that I'm under the understanding that there have been missionaries sent to the United States to help us. Years of us sending
blew me
people
away.
overseas,
Yep.
like, oh, we're going to show the world religion. And yet now they're sending missionaries our way because we're in such need. And then the other was outside of the religion circle. Probably one of my favorite clips on TV all time is the opening scene of Newsroom. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but just debunking that idea that America is the greatest country in the world anymore. Right. Because we're not. Statistically, if you look at it, we are definitely not. So this bravado that we go around that we, USA, because we're the best, when we're not. And there's certainly a lot of things that we could probably learn from other countries that would certainly help things, run better, maybe, lighten the load for a lot of people in their lives. But, we insist that we're the best and we know best. So, that may work for you, but not for the USA. So, I certainly think there are plenty of examples that could go along with this discussion as far as the Western arrogance, because it is certainly high and mighty. That's for sure. Right.
Well, I mean, just look at the last 18 months, almost 2 years now, of how we bumbled, managed, misheld, whatever you want to call it, COVID.
Yeah. I mean, other countries that have cooperated and resolved the issue for the most part, or have been able to keep it bottled up so that it doesn't, impact their fellow countrymen. And then we're here saying, well, don't tell us what to do. Like, we got it all figured out. We don't need you to, USA.
And I think as a denomination, I mean, think of the different nationalities that we have in our churches. We've got a French church, we got Asian churches, we have Korean churches, we have, and I think, is it the best? Is it probably the thing? No, but at least it's starting to happen. Yeah. And I love going, I've gone to the French church a couple times, and like you said, Curtis, a way of they worship, and it isn't an hour worship. I mean, they sing, they dance, and it's just like, it is the most beautiful worship. You learn so much from them. You don't understand the French, but they have interpreters that will come sit with you and tell you what's going on and what they're saying along the way, which is awesome. I think it's a great, what a great way to learn and to teach and that. So,
and it's participatory. So it's not just the pastor or just the praise team or just the choir. Right. It's everybody that's pulling off worship. I think that's the hardest part being a pastor sometimes is the isolation and having to do it all.
I think it's certainly got to be culture shock for some of our pastors that have come from other countries that are serving in churches. Like I know there's a gentleman in a community near me in Tecumseh who came from Africa. I'm sure it's got to be a culture shock, walking in and people being like, oh yeah, we do service in an hour and this is how we do it. And coming from where he's from, probably going, really? Okay, sure. All right. Who knows? Throughout the 1960s, the scope of Dr. King's activism work went beyond civil rights and into economic justice. He increasingly used his platform to advocate for causes like guaranteed annual income and health care. But he also vocalized his strong opposition to the Vietnam War, which caused him to lose a significant amount of American approval. Discussed the conviction it took to speak openly against the war when it turned public opinion against him and potentially jeopardized progress on the other issues. Ooh. Interesting, considering we have a similar situation going on within our denomination right now.
Right. I think he was trying to be as authentic as he could to the gospel, to how Jesus would have spoke and the things that Jesus would have advocated for and against. And, I was thinking as I was driving back home this morning from having coffee with a couple of guys about these questions, and that if Dr. King were alive today, well, if that Dr. King, if he were alive today, he would probably be, suffering as much of the scorn and hate as he did in his day, and much of the same scorn and hate that Jesus did from the religious leaders in his day as well. Often as leaders, when we're speaking truth, that's when we get the harshest criticism. Mm-hmm. Is when we're advocating and speaking truth, biblical truth that stands against political beliefs and personal beliefs of people, of the culture. But the truth needs to be spoken, and the fact that he didn't compromise on that. So,
and that's where I have more respect for him, as opposed to worrying about public opinion, sticking to his guns and speaking what what was real to him, versus like, well, that's just not something I should probably talk about because I don't want people to get upset. To me, it's kind of the idea that I like to throw out once in a while, that as a pastor, my job's no different than Jesus, other than to make the comfortable uncomfortable. So I think, sometimes it may not be viewed very well by some, or public opinion may not be high of you when you do this, but if it needs to be said, then it should be said, as opposed to holding back because, well, we don't want to upset anybody.
Right.
I think that's why we get ourselves in trouble, because we don't want to upset anybody. So you have to kind of walk on eggshells. But I admire Dr. King. You just staying firm and not bending, but staying firm in his beliefs and what he truly believed he was working for.
Right. So I love him. Love the book, Why We Can't Wait. Just quoted from it for the message that I was supposed to give on Sunday, which will be posted sometime this week. But I used that message. It was a dual purpose. It was for a presentation for school as well. But one of the quotes I used from him in there, and I can't remember it exactly, but he was talking about the lead up to when he was in jail in Birmingham, and he's talking about the racism and the just the awfulness that was going on in Birmingham. And he said, it's not the worst of it is not the actions of the bad people, but the silence of the good people. So it's when we stay silent and don't hold to our convictions, right, that is the worst. And there's so much evil in this world, but evil is the least of it. It's when we stay silent and we don't stand up for what we believe in.
Right.
It may be just me, but it just like the way at least they phrase this, this discussion on this particular point, in hindsight, I guess I see a little irony in the fact that, he lost, a significant amount of American approval over his comments over the Vietnam War, but yet look at the way in which our soldiers were treated when they came home from the Vietnam War. Yeah.
No, kind of. Maybe he had something after all.
Yeah. But I mean, I agree with, the quote that Kim shared and the fact that, I mean, that as hard as it may be to hear for some people, sometimes we need to speak up, whether you like it or not, just because I think sometimes the frustration is in some discussions, over sensitive matters, when you only hear the voice of some, and usually it's the ones that speak the loudest or might be against that, then the feeling becomes, well, that must be how everybody feels because nobody has spoken opposition to it. So, I mean, it's not so much, I think when somebody may speak in opposition to a topic, it's not to just create an argument, but just simply to show people that they may not be the only ones that think differently than those that are speaking up.
Right. So I pulled up my script. The ultimate tragedy of Birmingham was not the brutality of the bad people, but the silence of the good people. So I almost had it.
Yeah. Powerful stuff though, when you kind of go against the grain. I watch way too much TV because here I am wanting to cite another example. There's a show on ABC right now called Women of Movement, and it's focusing right now on the story of Emmett Till, the young black man who went down south and and spoke to a white woman and then was killed and just brutally beaten or whatnot, disfigured and just the fight that his mother put up so that people knew what happened and what, because so many people just like, don't do this. She insisted that, they have a public viewing of her son's body so that people could see what happened to him, and everybody was like, oh, you don't want to do that. You really shouldn't. And she did it anyway. And of course it's, was a huge thing that, helped push forward the civil rights movement. But I mean, again, it was just something that certainly in a lot of people's opinion wasn't, something she should have done, but thankfully she did to help matters, not just in her own son's situation, but, in terms of, like I said, the civil rights movement. I mean, sometimes it takes something powerful to move that rock that's in front of us. Well, let's see here. I lost my spot. Oh, there we go.
Segues right into the next question.
Well, Dr. King, or Martin Luther King Jr., went to prison 29 times. 29 times. Nearly all for civil disobedience. How many clergy members or friends do you know who have gone to prison today for doing the right thing? If you were to be in prison for protesting an issue, what issue would it be?
That's been lingering. I read it this morning, and as you were talking about Emmett Till's mom, and I was thinking about this and thinking about so many of the letters from Paul in our Bible came from when he was in prison. So we follow the teachings of a prisoner. And until you read the first question, and I thought about it some more, who do you know has gone to prison for doing the right thing? I don't believe. And I was having trouble coming up with an issue that I would go to prison for. But I think about our churches who become literal sanctuaries for immigrants that are under threat of being deported. And I would like to believe that I would go to prison before I would let somebody be deported who has every right to be here. Sending parents home to a country that they fled from, or sending the what do they call the DACA kid, the dreamers home, who they came to this country as small children or infants. They have no knowledge of that, no connection to their supposed home country. I would absolutely shelter someone in our church. The breakup of families for political nonsense is nonsense. So it would have to be something human rights related.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know anybody personally that's went to jail for doing the right thing or what. Another great person that came to mind was Congressman John Lewis. He was all about the good trouble, but I know he went to jail a number of times too, for trying to fight for the right thing.
Right.
But yeah, that's not like a quick quick one to be able to answer in terms of what would be an issue that you would go to jail for. But I think, I'm probably in the same boat as Pastor Kim. Whether it be a local family or somebody, from out of country or whatever, if it meant doing the right thing to, to protect the family, then by all means, yes, I would certainly get in the way of that, just to make sure that they were safe. That's a tough one there. What about you, Pastor Curtis or Pastor Jackie? Any issues come to mind?
I can't remember if there's been people in our conference, some of our advocates who have done that, who have been arrested for protesting human rights issues, whether it's like Kim alluded to, immigration reform, voting reform, things like that. There's some people I follow again on Twitter and different groups. Shane Claiborne, who is an advocate against capital punishment. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, that's an issue that if pushed would be one that I'd be willing to advocate and to that length for. And I agree with both of you. If there was a situation locally in my congregation where there was a family being torn apart by unjust laws, they would be willing to, fight to the point where, okay, I will protest ferociously enough to peacefully enough. Then if I get arrested, I get arrested. I think when we talk about, why maybe that doesn't happen anymore, I think as clergy, we're concerned about public perception. I think we're concerned about, is it going to impact our work? Are we going to lose our job? Are we going to be asked to leave? Again, because we've politicized these issues, even though they're scripturally based and sound. We have people in our congregation who would say, well, why are you advocating against capital punishment? It's eye for an eye. Why are you advocating against, these issues? Because it's, again, I think all these questions kind of push back towards that first idea of Western arrogance. So just my thoughts.
Yeah.
And then with me, again, I don't know anybody who's been to jail for that, went to jail for standing up for something, but it's just, it's interesting because I've been having conversations with my son in regards to homelessness. And, Claire has a big homeless population. You don't see them in downtown area, but there's there's different areas that we know when the church has been helping, putting hotels, but that's just a quick Band-Aid and not a solution. And many of these people that we're finding a quick Band-Aid for are veterans, so you go back to that, they've lived this life and it's just, there's mental issues. There's so many issues going on with it but the problem, like my son is seeing, is like, he says he feels like it's like, we both were saying like a bulldozer coming in and just pushing the homeless to another town. Like, you deal with it. We're done dealing with it. You deal with it now. So instead of finding a solution, it's like, let's just get the bulldozer and get them off our streets so we can be pretty again. And we'll make it your problem now. So that's something I definitely would fight for. That's something I probably would be even willing to go to prison for. Just, but yeah, that's, all of you have made great, I would fight right there next to you on that. But homelessness is something that is really an issue that I just feel that is, it's just overlooked so much. We close our eyes to it, so.
And it's easy to do that in rural communities. When we were getting the Family Promise affiliate started here in Hastings in Berry County, that was one of the pushbacks. Well, we don't have homeless people here. Well, yes, you do. They're not leaning against the corner building or standing on the intersection like you will see in bigger cities. Right. But they're here. They're living down by the river. They're in their cars. They're couch surfing. It's all around us. We just need to, like everything, have to have eyes to see. We have to open our eyes to bigger points.
Homelessness is much broader than just the bum that's,
exactly
camped out in a cardboard box on the side of the road or something.
It's more than
the difficulty.
Yeah. have the Martin Luther King's book, Why We Can't Wait, both Kindle and hard copy, and I can't find my hard copy, but I pulled up the Kindle version, and Dorothy Cotton in the introduction is talking about King's most poignant decision in the midst of the Birmingham struggle. The jails were full and protesters were awaiting bail, but we were out of money. She was talking about this group of people that had met to discuss. And there was a very long and intense meeting that brought together local civic leaders with Dr. King and his Southern Christian Leadership Conference team. And all of us responded to a call from the local civil rights leader who had invited Dr. King to Birmingham. With the church full of people waiting for Dr. King to lead another peaceful march through the downtown area, we had to determine. We had called a boycott to bring attention to the reason for our struggle because we wanted the business community to understand the goals of our movement. In this book, Martin recalls his experience of heartfelt despair as he quietly listened to the heated arguments about whether he should concentrate on raising money that would be used to bail out the hundreds of people already incarcerated or should go to jail himself, as he had urged so many others to do just that, not only in Birmingham, but in hotbeds of protest activity in other cities. I still cry as I read about the agony he felt as he listened to all of us in room 30. Most of us urged him to stay out of jail at this point because of that urgent need for bail money. Martin recalled that there were 24 pairs of eyes upon him. At that moment, he had come face to face with himself as a leader. After all, he had encouraged people from across the community to accept suffering, to accept jailing. It would not be only the eyes of the people of Birmingham on him, but the eyes and ears of people nationwide. He was alone in that crowded room. After enduring his silent agony, he communicated in no uncertain terms that he had made his decision. Without saying anything, he stood up and walked into the adjoining bedroom. When he re-entered the parlor where we were gathered, he had put on his marching clothes. We could see that there was no longer a need to ponder his choices. Words could not have communicated more powerfully that he had made his decision. The debate was over. So it was his decision to go to jail was a crucial turning point for the civil rights struggle.
Sure.
Well, as we draw towards the conclusion here, one last thing for us to discuss today. Another quote from Dr. King. A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. Why is it that still today both parties of Congress regularly approve large Pentagon budgets while attempts to pass social benefit legislation stall?
Because you can see it. You can see the army. You can see the military power. You can, it's tangible, but you can't see the 10-year-old in mental health care that was prevented from ending their life by suicide.
Interesting.
So I do know someone who is in jail currently, and I owe her multiple emails. And it wasn't necessarily for doing the right thing, but it was. Long story, but she attempted to die by suicide and take her daughter with her in that. As part of her sentencing, one of the points assessed against her was attempting to end her own life by suicide. It was a mental health issue. She's been in jail, prison for almost 9 years. For why? You know, the mental health services in this country are abysmal. And while I feel that we need a good military, there has to be some compromise. There has to be some balance, but it won't happen because it's not sexy. It's not something that you can tangibly see, that you can march behind. It's the hidden issue, like the homelessness.
There's more profit in war than there is helping the common man, or person, I should say. Excuse me.
Yeah,
You know.
it's a large industry. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
Of supply, of production, and manufacturing. Again, I'll point back to that first question about our arrogance as Westerners of imposing our will, our values on other nations. I think, when we look at Dr. King's protest against Vietnam, it was due to the fact that the poor Black kids were being drafted and
Right.
to die for a cause that he felt was unjust. And I think that was probably the basis of his protest against the war, was that you had poor people basically being drafted to go fight a war.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in that opening montage that you mentioned, Matt, from Newsroom, this idea of what we spend annually on defense, I think the quote is we spend more on defense than the next 20 countries below us combined.
Yeah.
How we could eliminate global poverty with what we spend on defense.
Well, and his point when he brings that up is that, I don't know, like it was 20 or 29, and then the next like 27 or like 27 of them are allies.
Right.
Like we spend more money than the next 29 countries combined, and 27 of them are our allies. Yes, certainly we appreciate our freedom and that it's defended by our military, and no disrespect to our servicemen and women. But yeah, it kind of comes down to like the local conversation of police departments, like, do they need all this military tactical gear or what to actually patrol and protect our streets? Or could we utilize some of that money to put into some sort of program, whether it be to address mental health or homelessness or whatever the situation may be in your community, but yet we can't seem to really get a justifiable answer as to why we need to spend so much money on this versus that, or
Right.
spreading the wealth. Sunday, I shared a message, that, talked a little bit about giving, and the idea of being like, well, what if instead of us, trying to accumulate so much, if we spread the wealth so that the person who's trying to live on $1 a day, like that's eradicated because of the fact that we have enough to share to give versus continuing to build up what we have. It's baffling, to those of us with compassion and empathy to hear about the fact that it's like, okay, well, we understand you have a lot of people struggling, but we need to buy some more tanks. Okay. And in turn, maybe this is something that needs to be spoke up about more so, because of the fact that, it continues to go on without a whole lot of challenge, or some people have just kind of given up that fight. But I mean, how are we to care for our neighbor if we don't fight for them? And that might be speaking against public opinion of saying that we need this ultra beefy military when maybe we don't. It's frustrating because of the fact that it's, to me, one of those issues again where it's like nobody can really provide us with a justifiable answer other than because. Any other thoughts on that?
It's a tough one, and I think it's both sides, not necessarily military, but talking about police. How many have we lessened our police force? And I know the area I live in, at night there's only 1 or 2 officers on, and you're not talking just one city street. There's a whole community there. So it's it's a discussion, but I think it needs to be a discussion and not a fight, just a debate. But both sides need to listen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Somebody else is speaking up in the background there.
Yeah. Probably the garbage man getting the garbage to the street. The dogs are protecting the house.
Gotcha. Got to defend that garbage.
That's right.
Maybe we should spend some more money on that. Well, my friends, it has been great honoring Dr. King, being that Monday again was Dr. King Day, and discussing some of these things that I'm sure we're not the only ones wrestling with. But before we say goodbye to our viewers, any final thoughts that anybody would like to share?
I think we touched base on that, but just quickly about doubt, we're going to have doubts, but as we've shared, dig deeper. If you have doubts, ask someone. If you have doubts, dig deeper and have that conversation.
I think too, it's, you can still have, you can have doubt and still leave an incredible legacy behind you.
Yeah. Amen. Yep.
Amen.
Boom. Drop the mic once again. Oh man, I was hoping to
doubt and turn around. You too could be.
Yep. Gosh darn it. I was looking for something. I saw actually a quote somebody had posted from Dr. King the other day that I thought would have really wrapped things up nicely here today, but I apologize. I can't find it. So therefore I'm not going to misquote Dr. King, but I think we discussed a lot of good things today, and certainly somebody that, like many of us, is flawed and broken and wasn't perfect, but certainly did a lot of wonderful things. And hopefully that we can honor, his legacy and what he did and continue to fight the good fight. But I will share that one of the things I posted on Martin Luther King Day that I thought spoke leaps and bounds to the day and how it is honored and somehow in some ways dishonored. But may the MLK quote we post today align with the words and actions we choose over the next 364 days. So it's not just about one day, but about an entire year or each day of our life that we live, and honoring, whoever it may be that we quote that we feel is enough to share. But thank you again to my tag team partners for joining me today for this discussion, and we hope you enjoyed it. But until next time, peace be with you.